snow fell in thick, quiet curtains beyond the window, turning Michigan Avenue into a postcard I couldn't enter. Inside La Vie Étoilée, the air smelled like rosemary, butter, and expensive wine, and every table glowed under candlelight. I watched the crystal glasses catch tiny sparks of light, like the room was trying to celebrate without me. At 7:20 p.m. on Christmas Eve, I should have been smiling, checking my phone for Grandma June's photo of Lily in pajamas, and pretending I wasn't nervous about the future. Instead, I studied Ethan's hands and waited for the truth to surface tonight. The ring on my finger had always felt a little too bright for my life, as if it belonged to a different woman who slept 8 hours and never checked school calendars. Ethan had slipped it on after a gala in River North, promising stability, vows, and a home that would stop shifting under my feet. I had believed him because believing was easier than remembering the last man who promised and left. Lily was 6 now, old enough to ask why grown-ups changed plans. Tonight, I told myself this dinner was a reset, a landing before our spring ceremony. Ethan fidgeted with his water glass, eyes sliding anywhere but my face. For a breath, I wondered if he'd planned a surprise for Lily, something to prove I hadn't imagined the distance. Then his shoulders loosened, like he'd finally set down a weight, and he explained that he couldn't keep pretending. He cared, he said. I was wonderful. But the feeling he was supposed to have never arrived. The waiter placed scallops in front of me with practiced precision while my world tilted. I listened, too calm, and felt my chest empty out. Well, like someone opened a door in winter. I thought about Lily asleep at Grandma June's place, her little backpack packed because routine was my religion. I thought about the wedding binder on my counter, stuffed with notes I'd written during late-night laundry, telling myself love was built by planning. Ethan's relief cut deeper than his explanation. He wasn't cruel. He was a coward who wanted out cleanly, before my tears could touch his holiday. For a second, I felt sympathy for the man who couldn't love me right. Then it hardened into anger for the woman who had rearranged her whole life around his shrinking heart quietly. My fingers slid over the ring, and it felt like a shackle pretending to be jewelry. Ethan always wanted everything tasteful and calm, as if emotions were a stain to scrub away. I refused to let him end this like a polite meeting. I stood, chair legs scraping, and placed the ring on the linen between us with a click. I didn't raise my voice and I didn't plead. I watched his expression falter as he realized I wasn't going to help him feel clean. I gathered my coat and purse and walked out before my eyes betrayed me. The cold slapped me the second the doors shut behind me. Snow gathered on the sidewalks, and Chicago glittered with holiday lights that suddenly felt mocking. Couples drifted past in scarves and shopping bags, laughing into their own warmth. Somewhere a church bell rang, and it sounded like a reminder of everything I was supposed to have tonight. I walked without direction, letting my heels sink into slush, because stopping would mean thinking. Thinking would mean accepting that the life I planned for Lily and me had been erased over dinner, in a room full of candles on Christmas Eve. My phone buzzed, then buzzed again, and I couldn't look. If Ethan was calling, it would be to polish his conscience. If my best friend was calling, I didn't have breath for the story yet. Instead, I did the inventory every mother learns in a crisis. Lily's overnight bag at Grandma June's, my work laptop still in Ethan's condo, my ID in my purse, my savings too thin. The lease was in his name. The building app, the garage, even the doorman's smile, all tied to him. I realized I didn't own a home. I rented permission, and it showed. I kept moving because movement looked like competence, and competence kept panic from leaking out. I brushed snow from my lashes and told myself I wasn't crying. I just cold. Chicago smelled like exhaust and roasted nuts, sweet and sharp at once. My thoughts snapped to Lily in the morning, how she'd ask if everything was okay while knowing it wasn't. I pictured Grandma June pouring cocoa, steady and ready to cover for me. I hated that I'd put her there again. I promised myself Ethan would never watch me beg. He'd taken my plans, but he wouldn't take my dignity. When my phone buzzed again, I looked, expecting another missed call. It was the building app, the one that opened the lobby door when my hands were full, and Lily tugged my sleeve. The notification was polite. My access credentials had been removed. Removed. Like I was furniture set on the curb. The sidewalk tilted. My breath fogged and the streetlights smeared. I understood the real betrayal wasn't only Ethan leaving. It was the fact that I didn't even have a key to my own life. I kept walking toward River North, toward the first bar with heat and strangers. The notification sat on my screen like a verdict, and the snow kept falling as if nothing changed. At 9:10 p.m., I walked north with my coat unbuttoned, cheeks burning, phone buzzing in my fist. I needed light, heat, and strangers who did not know me for 1 hour. River North was glitter and slush, and I slipped into a bar with fogged windows and a neon open sign. Warmth hit my face. Somewhere a crooner voice floated over low drums. The bartender had tattooed forearms and kind eyes, like he had seen disasters before and never made worse. He set a glass in front of me after I signaled for something strong. The first sip burned, and I welcomed it. My phone lit again with Ethan's name. Then again. I turned it face down, as if silence could keep his story from rewriting mine in the middle of Christmas. Numbness arrived in waves. I pictured Lily's socks lined on Grandma June's radiator, her little grin when cocoa foam touched her nose. Tomorrow she would ask why I looked tired. I rehearsed lies, then hated myself. A mother does not get to collapse. She reorganizes even when her heart shatters. That was when I noticed Dominic Russo, the man in the coat near the back. He did not laugh loudly or gesture. He simply sat, and people around him shifted as if making room for weather. Cologne cut through beer and citrus. My skin registered warning before curiosity took hold. I tried to stare into my drink, but his presence kept tugging at the edge of my vision. When he turned, his gaze landed without effort, steady as a hand on a shoulder. Even the bartender's movements slowed near him, careful, respectful. I wondered who earned that kind of quiet. Every sensible part of me said to leave before trouble learned my face. Then the building app flashed again in my mind, that clean phrase about removed access. I had nowhere to go except another lobby that would not open. I stayed, pretending choice was freedom and not plain survival. He rose and crossed the room with the unhurried confidence of someone who never bumped into obstacles. Chairs seemed to give way. He stopped near my stool, close enough that I could feel warmth from his body, yet far enough to show restraint. My pulse blamed the whiskey, not him. I could tell he was studying details I thought I hid. The bare patch on my finger where the ring had been, my grip on the purse strap, my shoulders braced for impact. His expression held amusement, not cruelty. It felt like he recognized the exact second I broke tonight. I dug for lip balm and instead found Lily's crumpled drawing, folded into my wallet like a talisman. A stick figure family under a crooked star. My name spelled wrong, hearts everywhere. My throat tightened. I was sitting in a bar on Christmas Eve carrying my child's faith like contraband. He noticed the drawing before I could hide it, not by leaning closer, but by reading my hands. Something in his face gentled, as if he understood my mess came with a child. He did not judge. He simply looked at me like I mattered, and that made me wary. Men like him did not drift into bars for no reason. He carried himself like a decision made. I wondered how long he had been there, whether he had followed me from the restaurant, whether Ethan had done things. My imagination sprinted ahead of evidence, because fear waits for proof. The bartender glanced toward him the way people glance toward a storm, then back at me, checking my face. I wanted invisibility, not rescuing. Yet that man's attention made me feel more visible than I had been all night. He seemed to know my loneliness had an edge like glass. I told myself to finish the drink and leave. But leaving meant wandering until sunrise, finding a hotel I could not afford. Calling Grandma June with a voice would scare her. The warmth of the bar pressed against my bones. I stayed, letting time pass, because exhaustion makes risk normal. He angled his body toward me, as if the room narrowed to our corner. I expected a flirtation, some smooth holiday joke. Instead, I felt the air shift, like he was about to name what I was avoiding. My hands tightened around Lily's drawing, and I listened even with fear. His gaze flicked to the drawing, then returned to my face with precision that made my stomach sink. Without introduction or small talk, he used my name, Maya, like it belonged in his mouth. The world went sharp. My drink tasted suddenly sober. How did he know right then alone? Alarm flared through me, yet I stayed still. I thought of Lily asleep, of doors that no longer opened for me, of the cold outside. If I ran, I would run alone. If I stayed, I might learn why he knew me. Following him felt like a dare forward tonight. Hearing my name from his mouth snapped the warmth into a blade. I didn't stand up and run, because running would have meant surrendering my only advantage tonight. Observation. I set one rule inside my head. 1 step, 1 hour, 1 exit, and I would leave moment it felt wrong. I finished my drink in 2 steady swallows, pressed Lily's drawing flat in my purse, and nodded once as if I had somewhere to be. The tattooed bartender watched me with silent sympathy. I walked past the holiday laughter and out into snow before my courage could dissolve into shaking. The street smelled of wet wool and exhaust, and my cheeks stung like I'd been slapped awake. A black SUV waited at the curb as if it had always belonged there. Its headlights were muted, not flashy, just certain. That certainty unsettled me because I had nothing certain left tonight. A man in the driver's seat stayed still, hands at 10 and 2, eyes forward. Dominic moved first, opening the rear door for me with an old-fashioned patience that felt rehearsed. I saw the driver's name in my mind. Gabe, loyal and quiet, as if silence was his job. The door shut with a heavy, clean sound, sealing me into leather and faint cedar cologne. Heat crept back into my fingers. Dominic sat beside me, close but not touching, giving space the way you give a skittish animal room. Why was he doing this? And how did he know? We slid through Chicago, past storefronts draped in lights, past couples huddled under shared umbrellas. I stared at the blurred river, thinking of Grandma June's warm kitchen and Lily's sleepy questions. Every mile away from Ethan felt like relief and like risk. Dominic watched the road, not me at all. The neighborhood changed, less polished, more lived in, brick buildings wearing decades like scars. Dominic told Gabe where to go in a low tone I didn't catch. Then the SUV stopped beside a small place with no sign, only a red door and a wreath. My stomach fluttered without permission. Dominic pushed the red door open and warmth and garlic rolled out like an embrace. An older owner appeared instantly, mustache and apron, eyes bright. He greeted Dominic with familiarity, yet his smile tightened a beat later, as if respect carried caution. His gaze slid to me, measuring, then approving. Dominic led me past tables where families leaned close over plates. The air was thick with tomatoes, basil, and heat. He guided me into a back room with one candlelit table already set, as if the night was scheduled. I didn't ask how. I watched nobody question him not once. Food arrived without menus, bread still warm, olive oil green as glass, pasta that smelled like someone's grandmother meant it. My shoulders dropped on their own. I ate slowly, feeling my body remember it was alive. Outside, my phone stayed dark by choice. Inside, the noise wrapped around me ordinary. Dominic kept the night away from Ethan, which felt like mercy. He asked about my work, the years I stitched together stability, and what I missed in myself. I answered carefully, then surprised myself with honesty. I felt less discarded, more present. Why would he care about me tonight, really? When his questions drifted toward Lily, my guard shifted. I shared truths. Her stubborn curls, her glitter glue projects, the way she counted steps when nervous. Dominic listened like it mattered. I realized Ethan had treated my daughter like a footnote. My throat tightened with gratitude, and that scared me. Between bites, my mind sprinted to morning. Was Lily's school bag at June's? Did I pack her inhaler and the spare sweater? Where would we sleep tomorrow night? Dominic didn't press for answers. He seemed to sense my math and gave me room. That respect warmed me in quiet places. When the plates cleared, Dominic pressed cash into the owner's palm with ease. The owner's eyes dropped in thanks. I felt a reflex to apologize for existing. Dominic didn't make it romantic. He made it practical, suggesting a place to finish the night. Somehow that felt as intimate as flattery. As we left, I noticed how people adjusted. A server straightened. A man paused mid-sentence. No one gawked, yet their attention followed Dominic like a compass needle. It wasn't fame. It was rank. The owner held the door too long, and my skin prickled with questions I couldn't name. Outside, snow softened the street, but not him. Up close I saw a scar along his jaw and a nose broken once. His eyes flicked to corners and reflections, exits. Even as he opened the door, his body stayed ready. I shivered. His danger wasn't a look. It was practice. Back in the SUV, I held Lily's drawing and watched my breath fog the window. Dominic's attention stayed steady, patient, as if he had decided I mattered. He proposed a quieter place where I could breathe without eyes on me. The offer sounded like safety, and I kept listening anyway. By the time we left the red door behind, the snow had thinned into a dusting that made streetlights look soft. My stomach was warm with bread and tomatoes, but my nerves stayed wired. I kept noticing the scar at Dominic's jaw when passing light cut across his face, and the way his eyes checked mirrors before he looked at me. Comfort, I realized, could still sit beside danger. Dominic did not talk much in the car. He gave instructions to Gabe in a low tone, then leaned back and let silence breathe. I should have filled it with questions, but my mind was busy doing mother math. Lily at Grandma June's, pajamas, toothbrush, the story she would want in the morning. Where would I sleep? And where would she if the condo door would not open for me? Gabe pulled up beneath a building I recognized only by the shape of its lobby lights. Dominic's hand hovered near my elbow as I stepped out, not gripping, just ready. The doorman nodded once like he had been expecting us. No names were spoken. Dominic touched a panel beside the elevator, and the doors opened without waiting. What kind of life ran on doors that obeyed? The rooftop lounge was nearly empty, more velvet and dim gold than a bar, with windows that framed the skyline like a painting. Music existed only as a soft pulse. Dominic chose a corner seat that faced the room and the exit at the same time, then guided me to the side that kept my back to the wall. He sat across, not beside, leaving space the way you leave space for someone who might bolt. A server appeared, and Dominic ordered water first, then something warm. Tea, maybe, without asking me to perform politeness. My hands shook when I lifted the glass. I hated that he saw it, yet I also hated that he pretended not to. When a man in an expensive coat drifted too close, and Dominic's glance alone sent him turning away mid-step. No argument, no scene, just a quiet correction. My phone buzzed again, and the screen flashed Ethan's name like a dare. The old reflex rose fast. Answer, soothe, explain, make him feel like the decent guy. I pictured the way he had looked relieved in that restaurant, and something in me snapped shut. I silenced the phone and slid it deep into my purse under Lily's drawing, as if my daughter's ink could guard my spine. Dominic watched my small decision with an expression I could not read. Approval, maybe, or recognition. He did not demand details about Ethan. He asked about my life in questions that felt practical. What I did for work, what I wanted for Lily, what I needed tomorrow. The strangest part was how he waited after each question, letting me choose what to give. I was used to men who filled silence with their own comfort. I told him pieces, careful ones, that I worked hard, that I had built routine like a fortress, that I was tired of being the responsible one who swallowed disappointment. The word responsible tasted bitter. I needed safety, but I did not want a savior. I did not want Lily growing up thinking love meant a man with keys to every door. What happens if I am seen here with him? Who else notices? I noticed Gabe in the reflection of the window, standing at a distance that looked casual to strangers and disciplined to me. Once, when I shifted in my seat, he shifted too, like my movement mattered. It should have annoyed me. Instead, it steadied me, because for the first time in hours, I was not scanning every face alone. Dominic seemed to understand that safety is sometimes just the right person watching the right hallway. Time moved in slow minutes. My breathing evened out. I could almost imagine that after this night, I would wake up, pack Lily's lunch, and return to normal. Then my phone vibrated again, not a call this time, but a notification from my email. Curiosity beat caution, and I glanced. It was a message from Ethan, copied to my work address, titled Concern. He wrote that he could not reach me, that he feared I was making reckless choices, that as someone who cared about Lily's well-being, he felt obligated to document it. The words were polished, legal, and poisonous. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. He was not trying to find me. He was trying to frame me. A mother who drank alone, a mother who vanished, a mother who needed supervision. My hands went cold again. Dominic saw my face change and leaned forward, not touching, waiting. I knew tomorrow would not be only a sad morning. It would be a fight for my credibility, for my child, for the story of who I was. Outside the windows, snow began falling harder, and I let Dominic's quiet world carry me through the rest of the night, because I had no shelter left. At 7:15 a.m., pale winter light pooled across unfamiliar hardwood, and for a heartbeat I forgot who I was. Then the night slammed back into place. Ethan's relief, the lockout notice, Dominic's steady eyes. I was still in my dress and coat, minus my heels. My shoes sat side by side on the floor like someone had aligned them with care. A blanket covered me from chest to ankles, untucked in the way Grandma June used to do when I fell asleep on her couch. The house was quiet, protected, as if even the air knew to whisper. Coffee drifted from somewhere deeper inside. On the nightstand, my phone glowed with 15 missed calls and 12 messages, most from Ethan. My stomach turned as I read the subject line again. Concern. I sat up, listening for footsteps, half expecting Gabe. Instead, I heard an espresso hiss and a ceramic clink. My fingers were stiff as I scrolled Ethan's messages. He wrote like a lawyer, even when pretending to be worried, documenting my silence, hinting at instability, wrapping Lily's name in performative concern. Anger rose hot, then cooled into something sharper. I could not afford to panic. Lily needed breakfast, a normal voice, a mother who did not look like she'd been shattered in public. I followed the smell of coffee down a hallway lined with books and art that looked chosen, not staged. Dominic stood in the kitchen in jeans and a black sweater, sleeves pushed up, hair still damp. Somehow he looked more dangerous without the suit, like the power was in him, not his clothes. He saw me and set a mug on the counter, then waited, giving me the space to decide whether to come closer. I should have said thank you and asked for a ride to Grandma June's, nothing more. Instead, I asked the question that had been biting me since the bar: how he knew my name, and what kind of man moved through Chicago with doors that opened. Dominic did not pretend it was small. He told me he ran an organization built by his family, that some of it wore suits and tax filings, and some of it lived in the gray spaces people pretend not to see. He wasn't proud in a flashy way, but he didn't apologize either. He said his job was to keep violence away from his people and push the business toward legitimacy without losing the power that kept enemies back. Then he explained what protection meant. Being near him made me safer from random harm, but it also made me visible to anyone looking for leverage. People would test him by testing me. If I stayed in his orbit, there would be rules, escorts, routes, limits, because he would not gamble with a child's life. The truth had teeth because it was not romantic. It was logistics and consequences. I felt surprise, yes, but mostly I felt a strange calm. Ethan's betrayal had already burned away my illusions about safety. The only thing that mattered now was Lily. I told Dominic I needed to pick her up, immediately, before Ethan's paper trail turned into something uglier. Dominic nodded once and reached for his phone. Within minutes, Gabe was at the door, coat on, keys ready. Dominic moved with him, not barking orders, just placing pieces into position. A child's booster seat appeared in the back of the SUV like it had always been there, and that small detail hit me harder than his confession. He had planned for Lily without ever meeting her. The ride to Grandma June's neighborhood felt too bright for how shaken I was. I sat between Dominic and the window, clutching my phone, rehearsing what I would say with a steady voice. When we reached June's building, Dominic stayed a half step behind me, giving me the lead, while Gabe watched the street. June opened the door in her robe, eyes sharp even before she saw the SUV. Relief flashed when she saw me, and then tightened into suspicion as Dominic came into view. She did not smile. She looked at him the way you look at a dog you cannot read, one hand already hovering near Lily's shoulder. Lily ran to me, hair sticking up. She pressed her face into my coat and then pulled back to stare at Dominic with the fearless curiosity only children have. Dominic lowered himself to her height, hands visible, expressions softening at the edges. He offered her a small wrapped candy from his pocket, as if he remembered she was 6. Lily took it, then studied the scar at his jaw like it was a puzzle, not a threat. June's gaze stayed on Dominic. In her eyes I saw recognition, the kind that comes from living long enough to know certain men bring certain storms. As we stepped back into the hallway, I felt the weight of tomorrow settle on my shoulders, and I would need my documents, Lily's things, and a clean total break from Ethan's condo before his concern turned into a public accusation. By late morning, my fear had cooled into a list. Lily needed her school backpack, her inhaler, the winter boots she refused to wear until the sidewalk turned icy. I needed my passport, my social security card, my work laptop, and the folder of custody papers I kept like a fire extinguisher. Grandma June kissed Lily's forehead and watched me like she was memorizing my face. I promised her I would be back before bedtime, even if I had to rebuild an address from scratch. Dominic didn't argue or dramatize. He asked for the condo's garage level, the elevator code, the hours Ethan usually left for the gym, all the boring details that make a plan succeed. Gabe waited outside in the SUV, engine humming, as if time itself was guarded. Dominic texted once, and 2 men in plain jackets appeared at the curb with empty totes, faces calm, eyes scanning. No sirens, no swagger, just competence designed to keep Lily invisible and to keep my shaking hands from showing. At 3:10 p.m., we pulled into Ethan's building like a memory I didn't ask for. The lobby smelled of pine garland and expensive cologne, the same curated holiday scent that used to make me feel chosen. Now it made my stomach clench. The doorman's smile faltered when he saw me without Ethan, then straightened when Dominic stepped beside me. I hated that my worth still depended on who stood next to me, but I used the moment anyway because Lily's stability needed momentum today. The elevator ride was silent except for the soft thrum of cables. I stared at my reflection in the mirrored wall and saw a woman trying not to look like she'd been evicted from her own life. Ethan's floor arrived too fast. The hallway carpet muted our steps, and the scent of his apartment, cedar soap and coffee, seeped through the door like an accusation. My fingers remembered the keypad automatically, then stopped. The code was his now, not ours. Dominic watched, letting me lead. Ethan opened the door with the practiced calm of a man rehearsing innocence. He looked past me, clocked Dominic, and his jaw tightened before he smoothed it into concern. I felt him building a story in real time. The stable fiancé forced to protect a child from an emotional mother. He gestured toward the tote bags as if I was stealing, not retrieving. My anger rose, but it clarified instead of burning. I was done performing for him. Lily deserved a mother who stayed solid. I walked past Ethan into the bedroom and went straight for my file drawer, the place he never noticed. Birth certificate copies, medical cards, Lily's school enrollment forms, my tax folder, all slid into a tote with quick hands. I grabbed Lily's stuffed rabbit from the couch where she had left it on movie night and pressed it to my chest for a second. In the closet, I ignored the dresses that belonged to my old plan and took only what fit a new one. Behind me, Ethan's voice kept trying to sound reasonable, like he was writing a memo. Dominic answered with almost nothing, just a steady look that made the air heavier. The two men in jackets moved through the rooms silently, packing books, Lily's art supplies, the framed photo of June holding her as a baby. Ethan's shoulders shrank as he realized this wasn't a breakup anymore. It was an extraction. No one raised a hand. The shift happened anyway, like gravity changing direction. I watched, unblinking. Back in the hallway, Dominic placed an envelope in my palm before I could refuse. He explained, not with romance but with numbers, that deposits and a fresh start cost money, and speed mattered. The envelope held $5,000. My pride flared, then my brain pictured Lily's safe bed, a lock that answered to me, and groceries that didn't require panic math. I nodded once and tucked it deep into my purse beside her drawing, choosing stability over ego because motherhood taught me what matters most. In the garage, the SUV swallowed our bags without complaint. Snowflakes drifted into the fluorescent light, gentle and indifferent. Ethan stayed by the elevator, arms crossed, as if that posture could protect his story. I did not look back for long. I felt lighter, not because I had won, but because my essentials were finally in my control. Lily's rabbit peeked from a tote like a promise. Dominic waited until I was seated before closing the door, careful with my new fragility on this holiday. As Gabe pulled us onto the street, I noticed a sedan 2 cars behind, keeping pace through 3 turns. Maybe it was nothing, but my skin disagreed. Dominic's eyes flicked to the mirror, calm, counting shadows like math. In that moment, I understood protection was not a blanket. It was a spotlight. With Lily's rabbit and documents beside me, and Ethan's poison waiting in my inbox, I let the SUV carry me toward Dominic's home, toward a new normal I hadn't asked for until now. Dominic's house didn't feel like a home at first. It felt like a museum that had learned to breathe. The ceilings were high, the windows were taller, and the city lights looked like they belonged to someone else's life. Lily walked in holding her rabbit by one ear, eyes wide, whispering questions only her eyebrows asked. I set our tote bags down and tried to act casual while my brain mapped exits the way Dominic did. Gabe stayed near the entry like a shadow with shoulders, pretending to be furniture. Every time the front gate clicked, my pulse answered. Dominic took Lily's coat, hung it neatly, and then knelt to fix the strap on her little boot without making a show of it. That tiny competence hit me harder than any grand promise. I had dated men who loved the idea of motherhood, not the sticky, practical parts. Dominic seemed to understand that safety is built from boring moments. He made hot chocolate in a saucepan, stirred slowly, and let Lily sprinkle marshmallows like it was a ceremony. When she giggled, I laughed too, and then guilt bit me right after, sharp as a paper cut. How could I laugh when yesterday I was being erased from my own apartment building? Lily didn't care about my shame. She cared that the couch was soft and the TV was huge. She chose the cheesiest Christmas movie on the streaming menu and announced it with the confidence of a tiny director. Dominic sat at the far end of the couch so she could sprawl between us, and he kept one hand resting on the back cushion. Close, but not claiming. Outside, the cameras on the eaves blinked red, and I pretended I didn't notice. I told myself it was protection. But it also felt like a reminder that we were being recorded into someone's files. Later, when Lily brushed her teeth at the marble sink, she stared at her own reflection and asked why the house was so quiet. I answered in my head, because quiet is what rich people buy, and what dangerous people require. The next day, Dominic's cousin Avery arrived with a tablet and a face that could have been carved from winter. She watched me unpack Lily's pajamas as if she were watching a market graph. Her questions came as polite logistics in my memory, but the feeling underneath was clear. Was I a liability? I didn't defend myself with romance. I laid out facts, schedules, and the boundaries I needed for my daughter. School pickup would not be a surprise, routes would not change without telling me, and Lily would never be left alone in a lobby. My Avery's eyes narrowed, then softened a fraction, like she respected a mother who thought in systems. That afternoon, Leo Santoro blew in with snow on his shoulders and a grin that didn't match the cold in his eyes. He patted Dominic on the back, looked at me like he was assessing a painting, and then crouched to hand Lily a tiny stuffed penguin from his pocket. Lily accepted it instantly, because children can sense kindness even when it's wrapped in danger. I watched Leo watch Dominic, and I understood their bond ran deeper than friendship. It ran like oath. When Lily finally fell asleep, Dominic walked me through the house in small, practical steps, showing me the locks, the panic button, and the room Gabe used to wait. I hated needing any of it, but I hated more the thought of pretending we didn't. In the quiet after bedtime, I sat at the kitchen island and wrote a new routine on a sticky note, like I was rebuilding my life in bullet points. I wondered if I belonged here, and whether belonging was even safe. Then, as I carried Lily's backpack toward the mudroom, I heard Avery on the phone in the hallway. Voice low, words clipped. I didn't mean to listen, but my body has learned that mothers hear danger before they hear comfort. I caught Lily's name, then a phrase about someone testing Dominic, and then the soft click of the call ending. My hands went numb around the backpack strap. The warmth of hot chocolate and movie laughter drained out of the air, replaced by the old cold from the sidewalk outside La Vie Étoilée. If they knew Lily's name, someone had been watching closer than I wanted to believe. I stood still, listening to the house hum, and realized my daughter was no longer a private part of my life. Dominic found me there, read my face, and lifted his chin toward the windows as if asking what I'd heard. I didn't answer with words. I just held Lily's backpack tighter and felt the need to do something normal tomorrow. Anything that proved the world hadn't swallowed us. Maybe a coffee shop, I thought. A crowded place with daylight and witnesses. I told myself daylight would make us safer, but deep down I knew predators liked daylight too, because it let them smile right in public. At 10:40 a.m., I walked into a Loop coffee shop alone, clutching my phone like a lifeline. Steam rose from espresso machines, and holiday shoppers packed the line. I chose a table with sightlines to the door and both restrooms, pretending it was just habit, not fear in daylight. My mind kept jumping to Lily at school, to her pink backpack and the way she waved without looking back. I told myself I deserved a small normal hour, but my body stayed tuned to footsteps and reflections. Every time the door opened, my shoulders tightened as if warned already. I stirred my drink and tried to read the menu board, yet the feeling of eyes on my back would not lift. The hair at my nape rose. A man near the window shifted his chair, just enough to keep me in view, as if testing my awareness today, too. He approached with an easy smile that belonged on a billboard. Blonde hair perfect, coat tailored, hands empty. He moved like someone who expected welcome. When he said my name, softly and correctly, my stomach dropped. His eyes flicked to my left hand, then back to my face, calmly waiting. I learned later he was Victor Kane, but in that moment he was simply a stranger acting like an acquaintance. He implied he knew Dominic, that he knew I had been seen leaving in the black SUV. He spoke about protection as if it expired when convenient for him alone. Then his gaze slid past me toward the street, and he mentioned a child in the way predators do, as a casual fact. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. Lily's name was not spoken, yet I felt it hovering. How long had he been watching us both quietly first? My hands stayed on my cup to keep them from shaking. I did not argue, because arguing draws attention, and attention creates stories. I nodded as if I understood, while my brain mapped the fastest route back to the SUV without leading him anywhere near Lily after school today either. He left a business card on the table, crisp as a threat dressed in paper. He did not touch me, yet I felt fingerprints on my life. The card carried a private number and a hint that he preferred meetings without witnesses, whenever Dominic failed to obey his pressure next. I waited until Victor had blended into the crowd. Then I walked straight outside into the cold to breathe. My fingers dialed Dominic before fear could turn to shame. He answered fast. I described the smile, the knowledge, the child-shaped warning. Silence followed tight and controlled with rage beneath it. Within minutes, Gabe's SUV slid to the curb, and my normal hour ended. Dominic's instructions came through action, not drama. No solo trips, no wandering, no predictable routes. I hated the cage forming around me. I hated more how my breathing slowed once it formed around my daughter's life, too. Back at Dominic's house, Avery met us at the door with a clipboard expression, already adjusting schedules. Leo hovered in the hallway like a joke that could bite. No one asked what Victor said. They watched my face instead, reading damage. I wanted to scream, but I swallowed it down. I wrote out my own rules beside theirs. Lily would be picked up by the same adult every day, and she would never wait alone at the curb. Her teachers would know a code word for emergencies. Lily would not mention Dominic's name at school. Not yet. Not ever again. That evening I tried to act normal for Lily, praising her spelling worksheet and letting her choose dinner. Dominic watched from a distance, letting me parent without interference. When Lily asked why Gabe always waited near the door, I told her we had helpers for a little while now, okay? Then Lily mentioned, on with the casual confidence of children, that a new man had been standing near the school fence at pickup, smiling like he knew her. She described his hair and his shiny shoes. My blood went cold. I kept my face soft and asked what he smelled like. Lily shrugged and said he smelled like winter and something sharp. I felt the room tilt. Dominic's gaze lifted and the air changed, heavy and focused. I realized Victor had not approached me for romance or money. He had approached me to reach my child. Anger replaced fear fully now. Later, after Lily fell asleep clutching her rabbit and her new penguin, I sat at the kitchen island with my phone in both hands, waiting for Dominic's plan to become something I could understand. I wondered what happens when a war chooses you. Outside, a car idled too long again, and I told myself daylight would protect us. Yet daylight delivered Victor to my table and then to my daughter's fence. The rules around me tightened, and I felt trapped inside a battlefield. If Dominic vanished, would anyone tell me why? I listened to the house breathe and braced for silence. At 2 a.m, the house felt like a held breath. The hallway lights were dim, the cameras outside blinking their tiny red pulses, and my phone burned white in my hands. Dominic's last message sat above a string of calls that never connected. I tried again anyway, because mothers believe repetition can turn fear into control. Each ring ended the same way, in silence, as if the world had decided I was not allowed answers tonight while my daughter slept upstairs, trusting me. I walked the perimeter of Dominic's security like it was a fence around a playground. The front gate was locked, the driveway empty except for Gabe's SUV, and a guard I didn't know pretended to watch the street, not me. Inside, staff moved softly, offering tea, blankets, calm faces, nothing real. Gabe answered my questions with careful nods and neutral words that meant wait. Protection wrapped tight, and in the dark it felt less like safety and more like being sealed walls I never chose. Upstairs, Lily slept with her rabbit tucked under her chin, cheeks pink from dreams. I checked her breathing the way I used to when she had colds, then forced my face back into neutral before she could wake and read me. Tomorrow was a school day in her mind, even if Christmas break made time weird. I packed her lunch anyway, lined up her clothes, and wrote the pickup plan twice. If I kept moving, maybe I wouldn't fall apart for the child I loved. By dawn, my anger had a voice, and I used it. Avery appeared in the kitchen with a tablet and a composed expression that felt rehearsed. Leo lingered near the doorway, smiling too easily, eyes too alert. They offered reassurance shaped like fog, that Dominic was handling business, that I was safer not knowing. The silence made me imagine every option. Injured, trapped, choosing distance, baiting Victor, punishing me for stepping out alone. Not knowing was torture, and I could not protect Lily from guesses. I texted, called, paced, then sat perfectly still, trying to hear meaning in the house's hum. What do you do when the man who promised safety vanishes? What do you do when your child's world depends on a man you met during a disaster? I looked at the locked gate feet again and felt the cage tighten. This home could hide us, but it could also trap us if Dominic fell. For the first time, I wished for a cheap apartment and anonymity all over. When Avery tried to send me upstairs to rest, something in me snapped cleanly. I told her I would not be managed like a fragile secret. If they would not speak, I would call every number in Dominic's recent contacts until someone answered, even if it blew their quiet operation wide open. I would reach Elena Russo, the matriarch everyone avoided naming, and I would put my fear on her doorstep. Avery's eyes sharpened because she understood leverage better than comfort. I refused to blink. Avery finally exhaled, irritated and, oddly, impressed. She admitted they could take me to Dominic, but only if I followed instructions exactly. The route would be messy, stops doubled back, phones off, and no calls to June until we were done. If anyone followed, it endangered Dominic and Lily both. I agreed without pride, because pride is useless when a child is at stake. I promised I would be quiet, but I would not be ignorant again. My hands shook, yet my voice stayed steady. Before we left, I went upstairs and watched Lily sleep one more time, memorizing the curve of her lashes. I kissed her hair and whispered a promise into the blanket. Not prayer, not performance, just vow. June stayed downstairs, wide awake, pretending to read. I wrote her a note with the basics and slid it under her mug. Then I pulled my coat on, checked my purse for Lily's drawing, and stepped into the cold with Avery. Snow squeaked under my boots like a warning. Gabe drove. Avery sat beside him, and I rode in back with my thoughts. We didn't head straight anywhere. We looped through side streets, crossed bridges, doubled into neighborhoods I couldn't name, then paused beneath an overpass until a truck passed. My phone stayed dark in my pocket, heavy as guilt. I stared at the taillights behind us, counting how long they stayed. If this was a funeral route, I wanted to know. If it was a rescue, I needed to arrive strong for Lily. After an hour that felt like a year, we stopped in front of an ordinary brick building with no holiday lights at all. Avery led me up narrow stairs that smelled of old paint and cooking oil. The hallway was dim, the carpet thin, the door at the end unremarkable. She knocked in a pattern, waited, then looked at me as if measuring whether I would break. My heart hit my ribs like fists. The lock clicked, and then the door began to open for me. Inside the ordinary brick building, the stairwell smelled of damp paint and old cooking oil. Avery led me past doors that looked identical, then stopped at the last unit. She knocked a tight pattern. My pulse matched it. The lock clicked, and stale heat breathed out like a hidden furnace. Antonio opened the door just enough to scan the hallway, then waved us in. The apartment was small, bare, forgettable by design. On a couch beneath a cheap lamp, Dominic sat half upright. A bandage crossed his temple. His eyes met mine, alive, and I felt my knees go weak. Relief hit first, so hard it made me dizzy. Then anger followed, sharp and clean, because 3 days of silence had been a kind of violence. I crossed the room and placed my palm on his chest, feeling the steady beat. Refusing to let tears lead, my voice stayed low. I noticed bruising at his ribs when he shifted, the split skin over his knuckles, the exhaustion carving shadows under his eyes. I checked the windows, the second lock, the phone charger on the table. Then I poured water and adjusted the blanket around him like he was my child. Dominic tried to push me back toward the door with a look that said I should not be here. I stayed anyway. I sat on the edge of the couch, careful of his ribs, and breathed with him until his shoulders dropped. The relief in his face hurt me too. He explained the night in down pieces, a meeting that turned into a trap. Men he trusted pulled into a corridor with no exits, police attention circling sharks once weapons appeared. He got his people out, but the city tightened. Going underground was the only way to keep me unseen. I told him what the silence did to me. I described the 2 in the morning light, Lily sleeping, my phone bright as a wound, the guards refusing details. I confessed I almost drove to the police just to force a report. I had learned that waiting makes you smaller. His expression softened in a way that scared me more than rage. He admitted his fear was not dying. It was Lily paying for my proximity to him. He said enemies do not hunt kings, they hunt the people kings love. He looked at my hands as if apologizing quietly. I realized I had already chosen, twice. First in the bar, when I accepted warmth instead of freezing alone. Second now, when I refused to let fear steer my parenting. I told him I was not leaving, and that we would face whatever came together, with truth first, always today. He closed his eyes for a moment, and I watched his breathing like I used to watch Lily's when she ran fevers. I pressed my fingers to his wrist, counting beats, then let go before it felt like a claim. Antonio left a bowl of soup, then withdrew without speaking. When he could talk again, he described the part of his work he wanted to be clean. Contracts, shipping, real estate, payrolls, taxes. He said he had been moving pieces toward daylight for years. Victor hated that. Softness, in their world, was an opening to stab through, and he knew. Avery's phone buzzed, and tension entered before she did. She handed Dominic a note, refusing to speak. I understood from his eyes. Subpoenas, audits, sudden interest in his companies, and a reporter sniffing charity filings. Victor was shifting to cuts that bleed in public, where mothers and children get crushed. I had feared guns and shadows because those dangers look honest. This new threat wore paperwork and questions, the kind that could make Ethan's concern email feel prophetic. I wondered how to fight someone who uses systems as weapons. Dominic reached for my hand, and I let him, needing steadiness. My mind jumped to Lily's classroom, to sign-in sheets and emergency contacts, to how rumors outrun truth. If Victor could weaponize courts and audits, he could weaponize custody whispers too. I decided we would document everything, alert school quietly, and move like we were watched, because we were now. Dominic's focus turned inward, like a storm gathering. He signaled Avery to ready lawyers and accountants, and to alert his mother that this had crossed into family territory. Hearing that word, a mother, made my stomach flip. This was not only his fight. It was ours, and Lily's starting right now. I stayed until his breathing deepened. The safe house felt too small for the danger outside. I watched the door and understood tomorrow would be meetings, documents, and decisions I never imagined on Christmas. I held Lily's drawing against my chest and promised I would keep choosing her safety first. Avery returned with an update. Victor was whispering to regulators, pushing inspections at Dominic's warehouses, and tipping a journalist about my disappearance from Ethan's condo. My name was becoming evidence. I stared at the plain walls and realized the fight had moved into daylight, where reputations die quietly without warning. The war ended the way most modern wars do, not with fireworks, but with folders. The updates arrived in clipped fragments from Avery, from Dominic's lawyers, from a news alert that did not name us. Victor's people had pushed regulators toward Dominic, and Dominic pushed back with receipts, timestamps, and a trail of Victor's own cash. Within days, the pressure shifted. A federal team froze accounts tied to phantom companies. A warrant followed. Then, on a gray morning, Victor Kane was taken in for tax evasion and money laundering. His smiling face vanished from the streets, replaced by silence on screens. Dominic came home from the safe house without victory speeches. He looked tired, ribs still tender, but his gaze was steady again. Gabe resumed his quiet post by the door, and the guards outside loosened their shoulders by a fraction. I felt the house breathe for the first time in weeks. Aunt Lily kept coloring at the kitchen table, unaware that an invisible storm had moved away from her classroom fence. I watched Dominic wash his hands slowly, as if he could rinse off fear, and I understood we were no longer improvising. We were building a life that needed truth. Avery said the next step could not be postponed. When regulators sniffed around, family authority mattered more than muscle. Dominic's mother, Elena Russo, needed to see me with her own eyes before she allowed my name into her protection. Hearing that made my throat tighten. I did not want to be evaluated like a contract, yet Lily's safety depended on doors I could not open alone. We drove north that Sunday afternoon, past frozen lakefront parks, toward the north shore where iron gates rose from hedges like a warning. Air filled my lungs, and my nerves rattled under my coat. The mansion was quiet wealth, not flashy, the kind that had learned patience over decades. Inside, the floors shone, and the silence felt trained. Elena waited at the end of a long dining room, elegant and still, her eyes sharper than any guards. She looked at my hands first, then my posture, then the tiredness around my eyes. I felt my single mother history in every glance, as if she could see the years of budgeting, night shifts, and forced smiles. She did not offer warmth. Dominic sat beside me, calm, while I reminded myself I was here for Lily. Elena's questions landed like scalpels, careful and bloodless. She wanted to know what I brought to a family that survived on leverage. I could have performed, could have dressed my answers in gratitude, could have promised devotion like a pageant. Instead, I told the truth inside my head and let it shape my face. I had no money to invest, no last name to trade, no political friends, no useful connections. All I had was a child I would protect, and a love that did not ask Dominic to pretend. If that was not enough, then I would walk away. For a long moment, Elena watched me in silence, weighing what could not be bought. Then her mouth curved, not kind, but satisfied. I sensed she valued honesty because it was harder to manipulate. She said brave women were dangerous, and her son needed danger that came with a conscience. My shoulders loosened by a degree I did not know I was holding. Dominic's hand found my knee under the table, steady, grateful. I realized acceptance here was not affection. It was a strategic welcome, and it still felt like a door opening. Outside, a lake wind rattled branches like applause. As we stood to leave, Elena's gaze slid past me toward Dominic, and I felt a private conversation moving without sound. She mentioned, almost casually, that someone had asked questions about a little girl at a school, and that those questions ended quickly. The room chilled. I thought of the man Lily described at the fence, the sharp winter smell, and my stomach turned. How much of my daughter's danger had been invisible to me? Dominic did not deny it. He simply tightened his jaw, and I understood his protection extended beyond my sight. It terrified me and steadied me. On the drive back to the city, Dominic kept one hand on the wheel and the other near mine. Not possessive, just present. I watched streetlights blur and imagined Ethan's email sitting in my inbox. I suddenly smaller than it had felt. Victor was caged by paper, yet the lesson remained. Safety was not a place I rented from someone else. It was a decision I made for Lily every day. When snow began to fall again over the skyline, I pictured that first Christmas Eve sidewalk and felt the shape of my life changing. Now I was not walking alone. Snow fell again over Chicago, soft as ash, turning the skyline into a blurry necklace of lights. Inside Dominic's house, the heat hummed low, and Lily slept upstairs with her rabbit tucked under her chin, one small fist curled like she was holding on to tomorrow. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows with a mug warming my palms, listening to the city breathe. On Christmas Eve at 7:20 p.m., I had been in a restaurant full of Crystal and Rosemary, watching Ethan's relief bloom as he ended our engagement. The ring had felt like a weight and a lie, and the snow outside had looked like a joke aimed at me. I remember stepping onto the sidewalk and learning, in one clean notification, that my home was not mine. Tonight, the same snow fell, but it didn't feel like mockery. It felt like a curtain closing on a chapter I survived. I wasn't begging anyone to choose me anymore. I wasn't mistaking quiet suffering for stability. I had learned that safe can mean slowly disappearing, shrinking your needs until you fit inside someone else's comfort. Dominic came to the window a moment later and checked the lock with the kind of habit that used to scare me. Now it read as responsibility, not romance. His world was still complicated, still edged with consequences, and I didn't pretend love could erase that. What changed was honesty. He had told me what protection cost, and he had paid it with sleepless nights and bruised ribs, while still making room for Lily's hot chocolate and my shaky mornings. Earlier, before Lily fell asleep, Dominic sat at the kitchen table and mapped tomorrow with me. Not with romantic vows, but with a list. Which entrance we use at school, who signs her out, where the emergency bag stays, what number I call if I feel watched. He didn't claim me like a trophy. He offered certainty like a seatbelt and asked me to choose it with open eyes. I realized how different that was from Ethan, who loved plans until they required loyalty. Ethan's emails could paint me unstable, but they could not rewrite the truth I felt in my bones. That truth kept my voice steady. I thought about Grandma June's eyes at the door, about Avery's cold scrutiny, about how Victor had smiled in a crowded coffee shop and made my blood run cold. None of that vanished just because Victor ended up in handcuffs. The lesson was not that danger goes away. The lesson was that I can face danger with my head up when I stop living inside lies. I looked up the stairs and pictured Lily waking, asking for pancakes, asking why the grown-ups whisper sometimes. I promised myself I would keep her world simple even when mine was not. Routines, school pickups, a code word, A mother who tells the truth in age-appropriate pieces and never makes a child carry adult fear. If heartbreak ever rerouted your life, did you treat the detour like failure? Or like a map you didn't know you needed? If an ending opened a door you were afraid to walk through, would you step anyway? I didn't step because I was fearless. I stepped because my daughter deserved a mother who chose herself, and a love that chose us both. Outside, snow gathered on the terrace rail. Dominic draped a blanket around my shoulders, and I leaned into the warmth without feeling guilty for needing it. For the first time in years, I felt seen without being managed, protected without being erased. I didn't get the Christmas I planned. I got the one that rebuilt me. If this story hit a nerve, tap like, share it with someone who needs a restart, and leave a comment about the moment your life changed direction. I read them, and I'm cheering for your next chapter.